Welcome back, historians! Caroline here. In previous lessons, we learned about a global conflict called the 7 Years' War, which was expensive for the British government. Parliament took steps to fix their debt crisis by reducing costs and raising taxes in the American colonies. New policies included the Proclamation of 1763, the Sugar Act, Currency Act, Stamp Act, and Quartering Act. Sheesh. I'm sure you can imagine that the colonists were unhappy. What's next? A wig tax? A window tax? A tax for wheels on your carriage? I know those sound ridiculous, but all of those were real taxes in England at the time. But the people in England voted for politicians that chose those taxes. So I guess they thought it was fine. Colonists weren't allowed to vote, so none of these policies or taxes were fine with them. Give us a voice, they said, and then let's talk. Today we'll focus on their grievances or complaints. I have a feeling that most of you can relate to that. What strategies do you use when you need to let the world know about them? Have you had good results? Let's take a look at what the colonists did to get their point across. Our objectives are to explain reasons that colonists were upset with the new policies, describe 3 strategies colonists used to communicate grievances to the British government, and explain whether colonists were effective in getting policies they disliked changed or removed. You may remember that colonists had taxed themselves since they established the House of Burgesses in 1619. Colonists had grown used to making most of their own decisions without interferences from Parliament. They were like, hey, we're free to do what we want. We know, just as long as the balance of trade is good. Got it, Parliament. And we discussed the Enlightenment and the Great Awakening, which caused colonial attitudes towards the government to change. Colonists favored local rule and representative government. Parliament was neither. In practice, the proclamation prevented colonists from settling lands they had fought for. Then you have those annoying acts. Your sugar and stamp acts raised prices of popular items, making the cost of living go up. Then there was the Currency Act that made it harder to do business because there weren't enough coins to go around. Nope, we're not done. Seems like there's no end to all these acts. You've even got the Quartering Act, forcing local lawmakers to foot the bill for a peacetime army presence in their towns, which they didn't even want. On principle, all of this was done without their permission. John Locke taught that every person had the natural rights of life, liberty, and property. Colonists were frustrated because they were not represented in Parliament. No one who was born in or had lived in the colonies was a lawmaker. And colonists couldn't vote for a representative, so they felt as though they had no voice. To them, it was like the government had taken their property, their money, without permission, through the Sugar Act and Stamp Acts, and even the Quartering Act. And isn't that stealing? A rallying cry throughout the colonies was the famous, "No taxation without representation!" Colonists also felt like Parliament had interfered with their liberty when they were forced to use a certain kind of money and told where they could live. It was a serious problem for colonists. Not being able to elect representatives meant that Parliament officials were not accountable to them. They needed to find a way to make members of Parliament hear their complaints. Although colonists couldn't elect representatives to speak in Parliament, they tried to communicate with them in indirect ways. To do this, they had three main strategies. The first was sending written statements. In 1765, 9 of the American colonies sent representatives to meet at the Stamp Act Congress in New York City. At this meeting, they discussed, they argued, they spoke their minds, and they were heard. After 18 days, they drafted the Declaration of Rights and Grievances. It claimed that American colonists were equal to English subjects. It opposed any taxation without representation as a violation of the right to property. And it argued that unless colonists were given the right to elect representatives to Parliament, that Parliament had no power to tax them. After they argued about how to say it and agreed upon the right wording, they sent it off to Parliament. Another strategy was non-importation agreements, which is a fancy way of saying boycotts. A boycott is when lots of people agree not to buy something. In this case, colonists made a pact with each other to boycott taxed English goods. The goal was to cause economic hardship for merchants in England who relied on colonial customers. If they lost money, colonists hoped they would pressure Parliament to make changes to the laws colonists disliked. The last strategy was to violently protest. In response to the Stamp Act, a secret organization known as the Sons of Liberty formed in Boston. Some of their activities included violent riots, street brawls, and creating effigies of royal officers and hanging or burning them publicly. They pulled down statues, burned customs houses, and attacked Governor Thomas Hutchinson's mansion after he refused to renounce the law. They even tarred and feathered tax collectors and threatened shopkeepers who lawfully sold taxed items in their stores. Man, I'd rather quit my job than be stuck between breaking the law or someone breaking my bones. As we mentioned earlier, the Sons of Liberty formed in 1765 in response to the Stamp Act. But over time, all 13 colonies had their own chapters. And let's not forget how tough women are, too. In response to the Sons of Liberty, some women formed their own organization, the Daughters of Liberty. They supported boycotts in their own non-violent yet effective and very clever ways, by having spinning parties. At these parties, they made their own thread and cloth, and they made their families clothing so they wouldn't have to buy any imported textiles. In 1766, Parliament called upon Benjamin Franklin to ask him questions about the colonists' protests. They're like, "Hey, Ben, what's up with all the riots and arson?" Ben was like, "Guys, we know you paid a lot for the war, but we colonists have paid our fair share already. We raised our own taxes to outfit our own regiments filled with our own troops. We sent men, supplies, ammunition, and food at our own expense." He reminded them that Pennsylvania lawmakers spent way more money than Parliament had reimbursed them for, and that local governments picked up the tab. He said, "Look, you guys just don't get any of this because you're not listening. If you let us elect our own MP, you'd have a clue as to what's actually going on." Franklin finished with, "Face it, there is no tax that colonists will ever accept without the right to vote for a representative." Or something like that. Parliament was not happy with his testimony. But later that year, Parliament threw colonists a bone and repealed, or eliminated, the Stamp Act and Sugar Act taxes. They hoped this would settle things down. Shortly after Franklin's testimony, Parliament passed the Declaratory Act. Oh man, another one? Seriously? This law said that Parliament had the authority to pass basically any law they wanted in the colonies, in all cases whatsoever. Wait. It says what? Parliament could pass anything in all cases? Oh boy. The law was Parliament's way of saying, look, we can pass taxes, we can enforce the Currency and Quartering Acts however we want, and we can do anything else we think is necessary in our colonies because we're Parliament, and you colonists have no grounds to protest our decisions. 2 years later, in 1768, under a new prime minister, Parliament passed the Townshend Acts, a whole new slate of tariffs on popular imported items, including paper, paint, glass, lead, and tea. Man, oh man, haven't they been taxed enough already? Sons of Liberty chapters opened across the continent, and boycotts spread and made an even larger impact on English merchants. Tensions between colonists and Parliament only grew, but now it really felt like us versus them, like who could make the other side give in? Colonists and Parliament had it. They just didn't agree about what rights colonists had. Many American colonists believed in natural rights, life, liberty, and property. And they believed that Parliament had violated these rights with their policies. Parliament caved on some things, trying to calm things down, but they didn't agree with all of the complaints. They thought colonists were trying to take power away from Parliament. Can't they agree on something? Anything? You! No, you! No, you're wrong! And it went on and on. Each group was upset, and you could cut the tension with a knife. As we continue in our study of the American Revolution, look for clues about whether each side is working to ease the tension or whether they were headed for disaster. Until next time, historians, always be clever.